Alright people, welcome back to the neighborhood. Wanted to connect with you guys today to talk about the ZOWIE EC3. Oops. Alright, bad joke. This is actually the VAXEE Outset AX. Possibly the best ergonomic gaming mouse there is. Easily god tier. Hard to compare it against something like the glorious Model D, Skull Mini, EC2, and now recently the EC3. I think a lot of ZOWIE fans should be upset with the recent announcement from ZOWIE, knowing that there's a mouse like this out there. Quite disappointing from ZOWIE, honestly. And look, I'm saying this as a long time ZOWIE fan. I've owned the EC2, I've tried the FK2. A lot of those mice actually got me through my days as a CS 1.6 veteran, CSGO. Those were my gaming mice. Those were super reliable and cutting edge at the time. But if you look at the specs now, and we'll compare the specs with the Outset AX here. Let's start first with the sensor. In here we've got a Pixart 3389 sensor. I think just as a standard, the 3389 should be in all mice moving forward. It tracks amazing. It feels super smooth. When you're at something like a 3389 or a 3370 compared to something like a 3360 now, which actually spins out occasionally on my Artisan Raiden. So having something like a 3389, 3370 just as a standard, I think is a must for most gaming mice moving forward, right? Also having the ability to adjust the click latency to 2 milliseconds, in addition to having these great HUANO 60G switches. And these actually feel amazing as well, right? Super light, super responsive, and I think these should be the standard switches as well. I mentioned it in my other video. I think the move towards Kale switches, not for me. I prefer something like these 60G HUANO switches. Not so fatiguing on the fingers when you're spamming a lot. Let's say you're playing League of Legends and you're spamming your right click. These HUANO switches feel awesome. I can spam this all day and not have my fingers fatigue. This is an awesome mouse, right? Everything about this really is the benchmark of a good gaming mouse, right? 3389 sensor, HUANO 60Gs, 2 millisecond click latency, optical scroll wheel, 24 steps. You know, the weight, 76 grams. Haven't weighed it. Does feel like 70 plus grams. I'm actually used to lighter weight mice like the Final Mouse Ultralight 2, the Hati-S. So, you know, having a heavier mouse in the Outset in all the VAXEE mice, it actually feels like I have more control with a heavier 70-gram mouse, right? So when you're aiming, you've got a little bit more precision. Certainly not as fast when you're comparing it to something like the Hati-S. But if you're looking for control, and a lot of people are looking for that sort of control in an FPS gaming mouse, having something like the VAXEE Outset AX, even on something for a mousepad like the Artisan Zero, this and an Artisan Zero is probably going to be the only combo you'll need for FPS games. This thing honestly has it all. I think this is a good benchmark for how ergonomic gaming mice should be made. Built solid. Talking about the shape, got this little hump here. It's a satisfying hump so that when you're gripping the mouse, it actually feels like you've got full control, right? When you're gripping this mouse. I play fingertip, so a little bit looser in my grip, but that's your ergonomic shape there. It's interesting because if you look at the Outset AX introduction videos, it says something about a tilt grip, which actually makes sense. It mentions when you have a mouse in hand, most FPS players actually tilt their hands so that when you're aiming with a tilt grip, it's actually easier on the wrists. Comparing something like this to this, supposedly it's easier on the wrist. I don't normally play with a tilt grip like that. I'm usually up here when I'm playing, so I don't think that tilt position sort of makes sense for me. When it comes to these ergonomic mice, not for me. It does feel nice to have that control with your aim. When it comes to ergonomic mice, I'm more twitchy in terms of my aim. I like to flick fast, and having a lighter weight mouse, usually something that's not an ergonomic shape, works better for me. And typically when it comes to my aim lab scores and aim trainers, usually having a twitchy lightweight mouse helps a lot. But if you're into tracking and you need that greater control, having something like the Outset AX, honestly one of the best ergonomic gaming mice there is. Even just on the topic of, you know, size and dimensions, comparing it to the newly announced EC3, it literally is the same dimensions. We're talking just a difference in a few millimeters here. Weight is about the same. The sensor is worse, which I think is funny. You know, just on the topic of the EC3, a lot of uncertainty and a lot of disagreement over the mouse not being wireless, right? That doesn't really bother me. I usually have all my mice on a mouse bungee, so for the most part it does sort of give a sensation of playing with a wireless mouse. But just on that topic, you know, this mouse isn't without its flaws too, right? I think Hardware Unplugged mentioned it. One of the greatest drawbacks with the Outset AX is the cable. I'm not normally one to complain about the cable. I don't normally paracord my mice as well. I have a few mice that are paracorded, but doesn't really make that big of a difference for me. But you know, the guys at Hardware Unplugged mentioned that this cable is just so stiff. And in my mind, I thought, how stiff could it be? How bad could a cable make a mouse? And you pick up a VAXEE mouse, you'll find out why bad cables feel so bad. I think if you look at just the way these cables are positioned, if you run into like the smallest tug in the wrong direction, this cable kind of jerks you in one direction, right? Like, it's so stiff. Even on a mouse bungee, you'll sort of feel some pull, right? And and the way this cable is positioned, this little stiff part is sort of built into the bottom of the shell here. Just one wrong movement will just pull the mouse in a completely other direction. Feels really weird, and certainly one of the biggest drawbacks of this VAXEE mouse. The coating as well, not my favorite coating. Does pick up sweat marks, oils from the hand. Even just throughout this video already, you're probably seeing a lot of the fingerprints on it. I wish it had sort of matte coating like on the Endgame mice. I think Endgame is king in that area. VAXEE does give you additional mouse skates as well. I have the Tiger Ice skates on these, but you know, I've just been using it the last couple weeks. It's been a great mouse, honestly. I think on paper and just with the recent announcements, there's really no reason to pick up a ZOWIE EC3 when this is it. Like, if you want EC3, pick up the Outset AX now. You know, built solid, better sensor, honestly a top tier ergonomic mouse compared to the rest. I don't think there's a better ergonomic mouse out there yet. You know, a funny thought just came to me, and to be quite honest with you, it feels like we're sort of in this weird custody battle where VAXEE has been providing these great gaming mice this entire time, and out comes this deadbeat ZOWIE company out of nowhere just showing up with an EC3. I think it's a little too late. it's kind of funny because the engineers at VAXEE were once with ZOWIE. So to me, I think it's pretty obvious with the EC3 what ZOWIE's been trying to do. I think they're playing catch up with VAXEE at this point. You know, even just thinking about my experience with the NP01S or the NP01, you know, that those feel like better versions of even ZOWIE's FK2. So they're really gonna have to innovate to catch up to such a great selection from VAXEE already. I feel like a VAXEE shill, but really, honestly, you know, just trying them out. All the components in a VAXEE mouse, like every mouse that they put in, it really is catered to FPS gamers like myself. So I had to give it a try, and just picking up the NP01S and this Outset AX, I think these guys are the real deal here, and ZOWIE is really gonna have to put out something great. So those are my thoughts about the VAXEE Outset AX. Overall, a great mouse. Honestly, to me, I think this is the best ergonomic gaming mouse you can get. You know, with it being available now, what's the reason to get an EC3 at this point? I think ZOWIE has a lot of catching up to do, and I don't think anyone should be picking up that mouse now, especially with what's available from VAXEE and how great of a mouse it already is compared to, you know, on paper what an EC3 would deliver. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Really appreciate you guys geeking out with me again. Hello.